Hello, everyone. Looks like this has gone on perfect. Good day, everyone. My name's Angie. I'm the program coordinator for the Business Center Guelph-Wellington, and welcome to our Lunch and Learn today. So today we are going to be joined by Lisa Cove from Co-Motion, I believe I got that right, Packaging Solutions. So she will be presenting as normal. If you are watching our live stream on Facebook, do feel free to add any comments into the any comments you have into the comment section as we move forward. I will be monitoring that and making sure that Lisa hears those comments and questions as well. And then if you have would like to reach out to Lisa or anything, please send us an email at the end of the session, success@guelphbusiness.com, and we can connect you to Lisa if you have anything you'd like to check with her. But for now, Lisa, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I will hand this over to you.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Just going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going here. So thank you all for coming today. Share screen too. I usually don't have trouble, but of course, right this second I will.
It's always hard to find that slideshow button.
Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
It's a little nerve-wracking. So this presentation today is called Packaging and Sourcing for Your Product-Based Business. Now I do focus my business mostly on food, but I will try to speak to points that are more general because some people are trying to package items that are not necessarily food packaging, but my background is specifically in food. So I do gear my conversations around some of that. Food packaging is the gold standard and everything else can kind of be based off of that. So we'll go from there. But if you do have questions, I tend to run on with my conversation. I'll just keep going. So feel free to pop in the chat or just come off mute and say Lisa, and then I'll stop talking and you can ask the question. Just so it's I can hear you when you're asking something because I tend to just keep going. So if you do have a question, feel free to pop it in the chat or shout out Lisa, and I'm happy to stop and answer your question. So who am I? My name is Lisa Cove. I'm the founder of Co-Motion Packaging Solutions. So I have over 15 years experience in the food industry, over a decade in production itself. So I started my career in technical purchasing. So that means I used to purchase machinery, process equipment, consumables, machinery repair operation, consumables for just producing food in large corporation setting. And then I moved to the raw material and packaging purchasing side of things a few years into my career. So I have a lot of experience in purchasing for packaging, purchasing raw materials, and technical purchasing. So in my experience in packaging, I have over a $20 million annual spend in a budget per year for packaging. So we were able to visit different production sites all over the world, visit different packaging manufacturers and go to seminars and everything else related to packaging. So I was able to learn from the best and the gold standard of packaging and kind of gear that towards my current consulting business as it is. So I do have experience as well as a purchasing and warehouse manager at one of the largest co-manufacturers of frozen entrees in Ontario for brands like Loblaws, Walmart, Nestle, and Sobeys. And I am also a professor of food safety and traceability in agriculture business management with Fanshawe College. So just a little introduction to who I am so you know that I am qualified to talk to you about packaging. It's always good to start out with that. So who am I and why is she here? That's why. So I want to mention Ontario and food production really quickly. I think it's important to know that Ontario is a leader in production in Canada. We do a lot of producing here, but we do a lot of food production. And that's because we have access to raw materials. We have great trade routes, so good transportation routes. We're close to Toronto, we're close to the US, we're close to the St. Lawrence River to get things from Europe and the Western Canadian side of things as well. So Ontario is a real hub for that. We have a skilled workforce, and we have OMAFRA and Food and Beverage Ontario, and these different organizations who are here and geared to help entrepreneurs but also the small business resource centers in Ontario. And if you're here today, it's because you're aware of the small business centers, but we really focus our attention on entrepreneurs and small business in Ontario in a really great way. So that's why Ontario is such a leader in food production and also just regular production of any everyday goods for all of these reasons. But it's great to start out on that point to know that we're in a really good place when we're starting our business. So I want to talk about the journey of a food business. I say food in brackets because again, this can apply to other businesses. I like to focus on food because a lot of us are starting food businesses. We're starting to scale or grow or even thinking about starting up a food business. But I do have food in brackets because you could apply this concept to any type of business that you're trying to package some goods. So let's talk about the process. We usually start out with an idea, wherever that comes from. And we do some small scale testing and we decide that this is a viable idea and we're ready to scale it. So we start doing more market research, we refine our idea, we go to production, and then we distribute. And the reason I laid these out is these are kind of key steps in our building our business plan. Now, they're not every step in the business plan. Obviously, there's lots of other steps along the way. But what I want to talk about today is that when you're doing your business plan, I want you to consider packaging at every single stage that you go through your business plan. And then I want to just highlight those today in this realm and talking about even from your idea all the way down to distribution and when you're doing your business plan. Consider packaging the whole time because it'll save you some money, it'll save you some aggravation, everything else. So let me go ahead and go to the next slide. So why do we consider packaging at every single stage? So packaging takes a significant investment from your cash flow. So right off the top, you know that no matter what, even if you're buying stock packaging, it's a lot to buy packaging. It's a lot of money putting out that you have to kind of set aside and consider in the cost of your good as well. And a lot of people, they think about what it costs to make the goods. They don't necessarily think about what it costs to ship it, what it costs to put it in a box to ship it, tape, glue, tags, labels. Those things all cost extra money that are that should be tacked on to the final cost of your food product or your product in general. So it's a significant investment. So that's why we want to consider our packaging throughout the whole process. Commercial packaging, when we get to packaging where the label is printed directly on the packaging, is very hard to change once it's printed, and it's very expensive to get into. So it's good to know exactly what you're doing before you get into that stage. And also managing your own expectations versus what's actually possible. We don't always have the same buying power as some of these large packaging companies. Some large food companies, for example, I always talk about Uncle Ben's Bistro Express rice because it's a special type of packaging that can reheat rice within 2 minutes. And it's like express rice. And it has a lot to do with the packaging that's able to be microwaved and heat that rice up, that parboiled rice up to a cooked state within a couple of minutes. That packaging would be significantly expensive for someone who's just starting out or just scaling up their business. But for a company like Uncle Ben's, who probably designed it and created it, it's not as expensive. So you might see something on the store shelves that you think you would like to have your product in, but in general, it may or may not be something for you. So something I do in my own business is coach and consult with growing businesses on what packaging is actually obtainable and what's useful for their food product or product in general, and what would keep their food safe and everything else. We'll discuss that going forward. So let's talk about the idea. So where do ideas come from? They usually come from producing a product that's loved by many. So you're making something at home and your friends and family encourage you. They say, you must be making this, put it on the market. People will buy it from you, they love it. So that's one way a food business is usually started, or any sort of business, but usually a food business, producing a product to meet a health concern or consideration. So perhaps you have some sort of dietary restriction, or you're looking for something, a healthy alternative, and you're just not finding what you want on the market. So you start making it at home, and you like it, and you share it with other people, and they also like it, and you realize that you want to take it to market. That's another way. And then some people do actually start food businesses or any business based on just something that they've researched. So they've done some research, they found some gap in the market, and they started filling that gap with their food product. So there's lots of different reasons why you might start a business, and that's where the idea might come from. But that's where everything gets started. So then we move on to small scale testing. So we've got this great idea. What do we do next? We start doing our small scale testing. So this is testing different recipes, different batches, find what people like, asking for feedback from family and friends and customers. So perhaps you're selling at a farmer's market or locally at a small wholesaler, and you're finding kind of where you position yourself in the marketplace. So you do that by determining your price point, where you kind of want to be. Are you on the higher end of this food product? Are you on the lower end of this food product? Are you trying to be the discount brand? Do you need your packaging to reflect a higher end sort of motif? Whatever it is that you're looking for, you have to position yourself in the marketplace. And this is a good place while you're testing to do that, because you haven't invested significantly into packaging or labels or anything, so you can make changes. You determine your value propositions, you determine what makes you different from the other guys, and you gain traction to confirm that you're ready to scale up. So small batch versus commercial. So I'll be mentioning both of these things. So I want to define them to you a little bit. So food businesses that are ready to scale their business typically move from small batch packaging to commercial packaging. So what does that actually mean? So small batch or micro business is that you're selling at local shops or farmers market, like I explained earlier. You have manual production, manual packaging, manual shipping. There's a smaller investment opportunity. There's you have an opportunity for proof of concept. You're using plain stock packaging, and I'll give you some examples in the next slide of where you maybe could get some plain stock packaging if you're at that point. And you just print a label. Now, sometimes you'll have that printed from a small printer, Vistaprint. Sometimes you can print it at home. There are lots of label suppliers in Ontario, so you could get something designed. You could design it yourself. The costs per unit are usually higher, but you don't have to have such a high minimum order quantity. So you don't have to order a large amount and tie up your money all at once. So yes, you pay maybe $1 per package, but you don't have to buy 10,000 at a time. So you may only invest $500 into your packaging as opposed to $10,000 or $5,000. So if your business is selling under about $25,000 a year, you're kind of at the small batch stage and your product is still changeable. But you're almost at a tipping point where you have to decide, okay, at a certain amount of testing, when do I want to scale it? So that's where, again, a packaging consultant or someone could come in to help you. So where does small scale packaging, where do you get it from in Ontario? So I just wanted to provide some examples of where people could go. There's for pouches or bags, which is extremely popular right now. It's super versatile. There's probably 25 reasons why someone might pick a pouch, and that's that picture there with the apple. You might choose a pouch for your packaging because it's lightweight, it stores easy, you can fit many in a case. It's lightweight to ship when you do have your product in it, as opposed to a jar or something like that that's much heavier just to start out with. So like a jar is heavy to start out with, and then the pouch is already lower. So you're going to save costs on shipping and things like that. So pouches are super versatile. They've been growing in popularity over the last few years. I remember when we introduced the first one, when I worked for Ferrero Canada, we introduced Joy bags, and in Ontario or in Canada, they were still not hugely popular, and now they've really made it. You can get those from Uline, Pouch Makers, or Rue Tree are 3 examples. In Canada, you can get a sustainable option from Rue Tree. You can Google Pouch Makers. I believe it's actually all one word. Corrugated boxes. So if you need some sort of blank box, you can get almost any size from Uline that you require. They kind of run the gamut on that in terms of stock. Jars or bottle, there's Berlin Packaging and also Consolidated Bottle in Toronto, that they pride themselves on being able to provide a small business with 10 items or a whole pallet, which is great for a newer growing business because you don't have to buy 5,000 at a time. You can buy 10 and see if it works or if you like it, which is fantastic. So those are great. And then paperboard, which is that printed box on the farthest left at the bottom. That is a paperboard box. It's typical of like your cereal boxes at home. Those can be printed digitally. So you can get some printed small batches from different places. Like I recommend innovative displays if you wanted to give them a call. So that's your small scale stock. Basically, it's plain, lots of different people use them. You just put your own label on them. The next would be commercial packaging. So this is when you're ready to scale up. This is when you know that you have enough proof of concept to invest the money into commercially printed packaging. So this is where the package is printed directly on the or the label is printed directly on the package. They typically, like you're typically required to have this to sell your product at grocery stores. So if you're going to pitch to retail, you might be at the point where they're asking you for printed packaging. You have high startup costs and high supplier minimum order quantities with this type of packaging. But there are ways to work around these things as well. If you're doing commercial packaging, meaning that you have enough volume that your hand packing doesn't really work for you anymore, you need more throughput than that, you might consider using a co-packer or purchase your own equipment. So you might have to buy your own packaging equipment or use a co-packer who has the filling equipment for you so that you can speed up your input or your throughput and your output at the end. You may distribute through brokers or retailers or directly to retail. Right now, I know there's a lot of great programs going on with Loblaws and Metro and this whole shop local sort of mentality that we're embracing, which is fantastic. It's really starting to get some great food brands. Sobeys been doing it for a very long time. I should always mention Sobeys because they've been doing it for a very long time, bringing local supply into their stores to try to build brands from Ontario or even from Canada. So commercial packaging is where you kind of need to be when you want to get to that level. But knowing that threshold between switching from small batch to switching to commercial is important to be really prepared for that. So what are the investments of commercial packaging? So the startup costs are much higher, like I said. So you have high minimum order quantities, sometimes 10,000 units, depending on what you're buying. There's different add-on charges like printing plates, which are the plates that the ink is actually printed on, or like it's sketched into and the ink gets applied to for printing. There's die costs that would cut out your box if you have special shaped boxes. Setup charges, set up for printing the machine. You have designer costs. So if you're hiring someone to make your label for you or whatever, designer costs are extra. Artwork samples will cost you. Shipping, storage, and packaging equipment. So I always really recommend that people consider all the different costs that come with commercial packaging, not just maybe the cost per unit that you get quoted, because there are other things to consider. Like if you don't have anywhere to store your 3 or 4 pallets of packaging, where are you going to do that? Do you have to have a storage unit or some warehousing that'll cost you extra as well? So consider all of these things when you're ready to advance. So doing your market research. So this is another heading kind of in your business plan that I like to touch on. The first bit of this conversation was really just explaining commercial packaging versus small scale. Now I want to talk to you about the different headers in your business plan where you should be considering packaging at the time. Market research. So gathering information about your target market and customer, figuring out who your competitors are. This is important because it will help the food entrepreneur with their own food product. When you're comparing apples to apples, knowing what other people are doing, understand why they're packaging their food products in different things. Maybe there's certain food products that we expect to visually see in certain types of packaging. So those two things usually go hand in hand. Often it's by design that they ended up in that type of packaging, but then the consumer kind of drives them staying in that type of packaging just because it is what it is. So we get used to buying things in a certain type of packaging, like cereal in boxes. Now, some people do come and they shake that up with just bagged cereal and they cut out some price off of that. But for the most part, people expect to see certain things in certain type of packaging. Find out where people are currently buying your type of product, how much your competitors are getting for their product, and determine what is trending. So packaging considerations at this stage. So what design aspects would your target audience find attractive? These are things you could be considering right at the market research stage of your business plan. What type of packaging are your competitors using? What do you like about it? What would you change? Does your packaging need to fit a certain retail shelf? So sometimes there's like hot tables or frozen areas where there's only so much retail space you're allowed to have. So doing that research and understanding how tall your boxes can be or how big your pouches can be or whatever at the onslaught might be a good idea, or figure out how tall your competitors are also doing their things, because yours would be relative to that. What type of packaging do you need to ship directly to customers? So I have had a lot of conversations with startups and scaling up companies, mostly startup, who aren't sure yet, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in distribution, but aren't sure how they want to ship something to somebody. So they have a frozen product, they want to ship it direct to the customer, and the cost of shipping, because you need all of that installation, is higher sometimes than the food product itself. So then that product doesn't necessarily lend itself to shipping one per customer frozen. And then you look at big companies like HelloFresh, and they say, well, HelloFresh can ship for $10 per person. Why couldn't I? But HelloFresh, or a company like that, has economy of scale. They're able to make deals because they're shipping all over the country. So they're able to cut that cost down, and you're not necessarily going to be able to do that right away. So just kind of consider how you're going to market to your customer, how you're going to get your product to customer, and everything else. So the next step would be to refine your idea. So determine what category you want to be in, certifications, accreditations. So do you need to be kosher, gluten-free, vegetarian, vegan? And the reason why you want to kind of determine this right away is to figure out if you can scale a product that perhaps has a special ingredient in it, or is vegan, or is it scalable? So sometimes if you're using maybe an all organic product, and some of your ingredients are organic, and you're buying them in small bags to make your small batches, is that ingredient available to you in a larger organic scale? Sometimes certain ingredients are hard to come by on large scale, like organic tapioca starch, for example, may be difficult to find. So I'm not saying that necessarily is, but it could be. So you should really understand that when you're refining your idea. Your distribution method, like I mentioned before, how are you going to get this to your customer? Traceability. So how traceability is being able to do a recall if you had to. So being able to recall any product that you've taken out to the shelves. Like everybody has seen the most recent Easter recall. CFIA puts them out, you have to be able to pull back your food product if you need to, and that's what traceability is. You want to consider shelf life, handling instructions, all of these things at this stage. Quality and food safety. So definitely want to talk about quality and food safety, but I'll also speak about ingredients, like I said, about scalable special certification and the machinery you would require to speed up your process. But in terms of quality and food safety, packaging is largely available for food to extend its shelf life or protect it from damage or food safety hazards. So knowing your product and knowing your food product is critical. So I just want to very quickly talk about understanding your food product. I'm sorry that picture of moldy bread has come over top of my writing, but understanding your food product is understanding what will make your food deteriorate over time. And every food product is different. So what I recommend to you before you select your commercial packaging, or any of your packaging for that matter, is understanding why or what causes your food product to deteriorate, and what type of packaging can prevent against physical, biological, microbiological, or macrobiological impact to your food. So just really quickly, what causes food degradation? We've got intrinsic factors like water activity, the pH level of your ingredients, nutrient content, biological structures, and antimicrobial components, so things that are resistant to bacteria. So these are intrinsic factors with the ingredients in the food product that you already have. Then you also have food degradation caused by external factors. So storage temperature, relative humidity in storage, gases and microbial activity. And then there's light. So for example, we see beer products usually packaged in amber glass because light does affect the flavor of beer, and it can make the, I think it reacts with hops, the protein in hops, if I'm not mistaken, which does give it a skunky taste. So that's why those products, something like beer, is packaged usually in amber glass to prevent light degradation. There's also presence of oxygen, pests can be a problem, or tampering and mishandling that might cause your food degradation. So just when you're starting out, you should always understand your food product, what maybe causes foodborne damage or degradation, and what you can do about it by using the packaging. So, and I'm always here to help and support you on that if you have any questions. So this this is supposed to be, this slide was just one-headed, but considering that you're getting to know your product, so does your packaging match your product category? So I mentioned this one because I talk about, like, do you have an earth-friendly product, but your packaging is maybe not sustainable? You should really consider maybe, you know, lining up and aligning your packaging with your food products. So if you do have a maybe an earth-friendly or a vegan, or your target audience is someone who really cares about sustainability, your packaging should match and reflect that. What does the ideal client expect to see? Do you require any special packaging for distribution? So when you're thinking about your product, do I need to source any additional packaging to ship this? Remember that it's not always just the initial package, but if you're shipping wholesale or to a retailer and you have to put some inside a case, you have that cost of the case, you have the cost of tape, labels, everything else is extra. So what other packaging do you require? Because those could all be rolled into the total bill of materials for your whole production. How will you maintain traceability? So how do you do a recall if you needed to? What is your process? Does the packaging help you to promote your desired shelf life? So do you really understand your product? And is the packaging there to support that? And is your ideal package suitable for the handling instructions? So you might have this beautiful package, but you have a frozen product and that package is not compatible with the freezer. You may need to make an adjustment based on that. So consider that when you're getting to know your food product. Does your food product or packaging promote product quality? Is your packaging food safe? So we typically don't run into any issues. I shouldn't say any, but for the most part, if you're going to a reputable supplier within Ontario or Canada or North America and you're buying your packaging, oftentimes they can present you with information that they are third parties audited, certified, so they're food safe, SQF, maybe BRC, they HACCP even. They can show you that their packaging is considered food safe based on Health Canada recommendations or in FDA in the US. Is your packaging food safe? If you're buying from overseas, you must buy from reputable sources as much as possible. So look for reviews if you don't really know or personally know them or have never had anything from them. Anybody overseas that isn't in North America, you just want to be sure that you're buying from reputable suppliers to ensure that the product is food safe or compatible with the ingredients that you're using. Sometimes I've heard of just different reactions where maybe you're using like a metal tray or aluminum tray for maybe a frozen lasagna or something like that. And the acidity in the tomato reacts with the aluminum because there's a special coating or not enough coating or something along those lines. And it causes some sort of corrosion inside there. That has happened. I've seen that before. So just make sure that what you're packaging in actually is compatible with the ingredients that you're using. If you are going to go to automatic machinery, what would you need to produce your package at a commercial scale? And is your packaging allowing itself to be that. So some packages are not made for automation. So if you're talking to your packaging supplier, they can tell you whether or not this is going to work for that. And then having a policy for non-conforming ingredients and packaging. So this is just a reminder that if you do get product in that you don't agree with, it's not food safe, it's not, the quality is not up to what you expect to be paying for, you should have a policy with your suppliers to be able to return that. And that includes ingredients for your food product. So on to operations section of your business plan. So the operations area of your business plan is where you explain where you're going to be doing the work, where you're going to be working out of, what does it look like, how much does it cost to work there. So in operations, when we're choosing the location of our food production, we should consider the certifications, food safety, access to suppliers, access to warehousing, distribution chains, and legislative considerations. So that's a mouthful. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the certifications. I'm talking about any sort of food safety certifications that they have. Perhaps they're certified gluten-free location. They're certified to be doing the product that you're saying that you're doing. Food safety, so they have some sort of food safety plan in place. Their access to suppliers is good, so you're able to get everything you need to make your product from that location. You don't have to extra truck it in because you perhaps found a really good deal at a co-manufacturer who's out in the middle of nowhere, but you have to pay extra freight to get all your ingredients for your packaging to that location. Access to warehouse and distribution chains, and then legislative considerations. This would be related to if you're producing a meat product, most specifically, and making sure that you can actually produce that product in that location based on CFIA regulations. So the quantity you expect to make in the production capabilities and the availability of your co-packers. So do you have enough time to make the product that you want to make on their production line, and how much you need to make? Do they have minimum order quantities? What's their output and equipment specifications? Do they have everything you need? And if you're working in a commercial kitchen, what's the actual output volume in the available time? So say you rent the kitchen for a day, how many food products can you actually put out in that day? So packaging considerations at this stage: does the operation that you've chosen have the capability of automatically packaging your product? Do they have the right equipment? Will your co-packer be responsible for ordering the packaging? So sometimes there are situations where the co-packer can do that for you. They will just take care of everything from start to finish, and you just show up on the day of production if you want to and watch your product run. And does your operation have the capability to store stock for you? So again, if you get into that level where you're buying 3 or 4 pallets of packaging, do you have anywhere to keep it, or does your co-manufacturer do that for you? So production, again, another headline in your business plan. Work with a food scientist or product developer to make your recipe scalable. So not every single recipe is just able to be scaled on a 1-to-1 ratio. And if you are trying to extend shelf life or different things like that, if you're trying to scale your recipe, often you should work with a food scientist to make sure that your recipe is actually scalable and it's going to come out the way that you want it to. You would order raw ingredients and your packaging from your suppliers, ensure food safety is maintained during the process, package your product, add the date code for traceability, taste your samples, and store the product. So that's what production kind of looks like in the food world. Your packaging considerations when you're talking about it in your business plan: will your packaging arrive in time for production? So if you're ordering from overseas, the lead times are quite high right now. Do you have means for printing date codes? Do you have traceability process and storage? So next up in the business plan is distribution. So sorry that my pictures have disappeared. I had some photos on here to make it a little bit more interesting, but they seem to have disappeared. So ensure that you choose the right distribution method that maintains product handling instructions. So testing your packaging to make sure that it can handle transport, have a shipping and return policy, and depending on your scale of your operation, you should have contracts with your transportation company to guarantee they'll maintain your handling requirements. So what do I mean by this is, do you need your product to stay refrigerated or frozen during transportation? So -18 or lower Celsius, or 4 degrees or lower for refrigeration. understanding that those reefer trucks are a little bit more cost when you're shipping that way. So just knowing how you're going to distribute and considering other options if that distribution cost is too high. So perhaps wholesale is more for you, or you personally will do some delivering. So packaging considerations at this stage, working with packaging suppliers who test your packaging for suitability for distribution, testing your packaging in the distribution chain. So actually shipping one of your products is a good idea. Have a contingency plan for distribution mishaps. So it can happen. And if you get to the level where you're working with retailers and you're investing a lot of money, you really have to also honor the contracts that you have with them. So if they tell you a deadline and a date and amount of money or amount of product they need at the store at that time, you often have to honor that, or there can be repercussions such as fines to you for not meeting your obligations. So have a plan in place if there is any sort of loss of product during distribution or something like that. And pricing, another cog in the wheel of your business plan. So you have to price your product. So this is where some people get hung up, forgetting it's not that it's necessarily difficult to price your product, but it's often forgotten to include so many different added things that come up during the whole production. So there's production cost itself. You have your ingredients, your packaging, your co-packer fees, and general overhead. There's also scrap rates, return rates. There's freight costs you have to consider, and those are often fluctuating. Storage, if you have to store your finished goods somewhere, or even your packaging or raw materials. Distributors margin, the retailer's margin, and your marketing. So how you price should consider as much as possible in terms of the cost. Anything that actually costs you comes out of your pocket, you should consider that. But what are your packaging considerations at this stage? So the cost for package is not the only cost to consider. So we have shipping boxes, which we call tertiary packaging, labels, tape, pallet, any other costs. Make sure you're including that when you're doing your business plan. Warehouse fees to hold stock, interest charges on borrowed funds. These are things that we often forget about, but they do cost. And then there's freight for additional costs like frozen or refrigerated. So when you're doing your pricing, my best advice is to ensure that you include everything. So current affairs, this is a question I always like to include this because some people aren't aware of what's kind of going on. But at the moment, we do have astronomical shipping costs from overseas. We have quite a bit of shipping queues. So the cost used to be quite low to ship, not low, but relatively comparatively to now, to what it costs to ship a container from overseas. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot of equipment that still needs to be offloaded off of ships and the shipping delays. And this has been going on for a couple of years, obviously related to the pandemic, but also just overflow now at this point. We have other sort of disruptions, raw material shortages, recycled material shortages. So that relates to, there was like paper shortages and corrugated box shortages not too long ago, and it might still even be going on. And that is kind of because Amazon during the pandemic really grew with their sales, and they gobbled up a lot of corrugated boxes. And if that doesn't get back into the recycling stream and kind of back to the corrugators, we don't get that paper back. So it slows down production. So then we have raw material shortages, which might slow down the opportunity for you to get your boxes if you were looking for them. So lead times are long, labor is expensive, and production time availability is far out. So if you're planning now, you'd be looking for 2 months out or 3 months out. So if you are looking to do some sort of packaging, make sure that you consider the timelines, that there are some current affairs that are still going on in terms of shipping queues and things like that. So this is, again, another local suppliers list, pouch makers and root trees for bag, flexible packaging, you could call Sunoco or Westrock, boxboard, there's Ellis Packaging, Ingersoll Paper, Westrock, and corrugate, Cascades, and Atlanta Packaging. Now these would be more of your local suppliers for printed packaging, and that's why I named them. So for commercial, and the suppliers I put at the beginning were more for small scale stock packaging. So that is in a nutshell. I did want to leave enough time for questions, so I kind of went through that really quickly. This is my contact information. If you do want to reach out to me, again, I am a packaging consultant. So I work with starting up and scaling up food businesses to try and mitigate some of the work that is done when you're doing your initial research. I have a lot of experience in packaging. So that is where I spend my time and I can help you. So if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out. But I will go ahead and stop the share right now and pass it back over to Angela.
That's wonderful. So thank you. Another packaging source, if you're looking for boxes that I have used in the past, is Boxer Print. They're out of London. They do smaller scale box packaging. So it's not going to be quite the higher quality that Ellis. I've used Ellis as well before, but the quality is a little different, but they have that smaller much smaller print runs, so they're great if you're just getting into it. Some of the things, yes, I like to also note, just as I have a background in this too, to some extent, is when you're dealing with your packages, and as Lisa had stated, the delays on transportation are pretty high, but make sure you have enough time in there for printing as well. And because that printing can take 2 to 3 months sometimes to get you in that queue to be printed. And if you are purchasing for overseas, make sure you realize China shuts down for the month of February. So they do a quick run at the end of January. So you want to either do it in the fall or hold off till March, April. So if you're trying to launch something, you're like, I need it February, you're not going to get it. It's just not going to happen. So
very true. Yeah.
Those are things to note. In the questions, I have a great presentation, reusable food packaging options. Are you aware of current trends or options available?
Yes, so this is starting to take off, reusable. In the, I believe it's Guelph, I don't want to quote it incorrectly, but there is a new company called A Friendlier Company, and they're for restaurant packaging. So you basically buy into something like you pay a fee and you get some reusable packaging, and then your customers can drop them off at different depot locations. So it is starting to become a thing. That's for the restaurant. In terms of reusable packaging, it's very, very, very in its infancy. So in Europe, we are seeing the start of a company called Loop, which is and it is starting to come into the US as well, where large brand names are starting to grab onto this idea of reusable packaging, and they're all agreeing on the same sort of size packaging and then putting their products into reusable. It's kind of still unattainable maybe for the startups and the scale ups at this level, but I think it's coming down the pipeline. So keep an eye out on that and look at the company Loop and follow what they're doing. They're probably going to be the leader in that.
That's very cool. That's good to know, because like it's nice to see the progression and movement of how packaging has changed. Like even for me, like I was in maple production for a few years, and from where we started to where they ended up, and that progress is quite interesting. Other chat questions. Are you starting to see more utilization of hemp or mushroom food packaging in sustainable packaging?
So we are. I want to put like an asterisk beside that, because we were doing really well. And then of course, when the pandemic happened and costs started to rise on everything, started to see sort of a backwards motion on some of the sustainability. And it's unfortunate, but it's just because costs of everything are rising. Costs of food ingredients in general are getting so high that it's really hard for people to account for paying this extra for the packaging, unless their product really lends themselves to that extra threshold of cost that you can apply to your product, and your customers are really expecting it. So I am seeing a growth in PLA packaging. So I work directly with a company called Good Natured, and they manufacture thermoformed plastics. They're quote unquote plastics, but they're made out of renewable resources. So annually renewable sugar or corn sort of starches, and it makes a thermoformed plastic that resembles and works exactly the same as plastic, but it's not made of plastic. So that is growing, and that is a market segment you will see. It's biodegradable, compostable in a commercial facility. You will see that segment grow, mostly because Good Natured themselves have purchased most of the thermoformers in the area. So they're poised to grow that market very well. So definitely Good Natured, they're in the US and in Canada, but based out of Vancouver, BC. So yeah, you are starting to see a little bit of growth in those areas, but I do caution that right now we're at kind of a pause before we can climb that hill again.
Yeah, I was going to say with some of the, from my experiences, some of the mushroom and hemp-based ones too, the shelf life tends to go down slightly because they are more aerated, so they're allowing air or other things through osmosis to the package a little bit easier. So you got to do that trade-off. You have to weigh how long you want that product shelf life to be as well. Other questions. I haven't found a made in Canada compostable or recyclable mailer or padded envelope. Is there one that you know of?
Yes, so I believe, and I'm not positive, but I believe you should try to check out Good Natured's website. They have a wholesale side. And they may have a mailer, I'm not positive. And that would be manufactured in North America, if I'm not mistaken. But you're right, if it's not Good Natured, it is being manufactured typically overseas. So it would be in India or in China. And the product would be the similar PLA, it'd be polylactic acid. So yeah, made in Canada, again, there's really only one guy, the Good Natured company, doing stuff like that, and everybody else is sort of importing from overseas right now. Any sort of compostable packaging is unfortunately made overseas. So you have to consider that in terms of sustainability. When we look at sustainability, we have to look at the whole life cycle of that package. Where did it come from? How long did it take to get here? What did we put into it to get that here? And is it really more sustainable? A recycled piece of paper is much more sustainable and one of the most sustainable things that there are, because it can be regrown, it can be easily recycled. And things like aluminum, which is infinitely recycled, that is where we want to look at. That's actually more sustainable, or can be considered more sustainable than some of these compostable products that aren't necessarily actually compostable unless they're in the correct facility. So we have to be honest about that. I think we should have an honest conversation about that as well.
That's wonderful. Another question, overseas packaging. How do regulators here in Ontario check to see if their package is food safe? She's asking, do you need to have it certified by an Ontario regulator or some sort before she starts using it?
No, I wouldn't say that you have to. It depends on what you're doing. So if you're looking to ship throughout Canada or into the US and you want to be CFIA compliant, there is a portion of that requires you to be third-party audited and HACCP certified, which requires you to do the due diligence to ensure that your suppliers are also certified food safe. And so there's this whole process where the onus is on you as the manufacturer to make sure it's happening. There isn't someone who's going to check that for you, but you can make sure that you get those certifications and buy from reputable suppliers. So someone's recommended it to you, you've gone online and you've done your due diligence, and then you've asked that manufacturer for all of those documentations to prove. And then you can do some cross-referencing to make sure that the material is on. Canada has, they've archived it, but it is available, the Health Canada's list of approved materials and construction supplies. I believe it's something really long like that, but it's been archived. They don't update it anymore, but if it's made out of a material that's safe, you'll find it on there. So it really is up to you to do that due diligence, but CFIA will require that you at least look into it.
Yeah, I was going to say, what in one of my past lives, we had to actually send our packaging and our materials, we have filled package, to a university lab, to confirm that the packaging on its own and the materials also passed all regulations. So they're not cheap. So if you do end up deciding to do something off the books or something a little off from center that not everybody is using, there are options, but they tend to be costly to do that research piece.
Yeah.
I know the University of Guelph has a section that does some stuff with food. And then there's a couple of others around that are labs and stuff that are available. So yeah, so lots of information. Those of you who are in the room, if you could hang on for a minute before you leave, stick around. We can have a couple more chats, but we are coming up to our 1 o'clock for those who are watching online or watching the stream after the fact. Thank you, Lisa, for joining us. And thank you everyone for participating. Next week is actually Earth Week. Earth Day, I think, is on Friday, next Friday. So we have a wonderful 8 steps towards a low carbon workplace workshop coming in. So that's our lunch and learn next week. So if you're interested in how to reduce your carbon footprint as a small business, which is a lot harder than the big guys, we know that. So that might be a great session to come to. So we look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you again, Lisa. Thank you, everyone. For those of you again in the room, please just stick around for a second and we'll continue our conversation.